Let's talk about benefits Britain. More than 600,000 graduates are now claiming benefits. This also comes as a new poll suggests that 1 in 4 young Brits could leave the country because they just don't feel they've got a future here, can't afford to buy a home, worried about their finances, don't feel this is a country that's going anywhere. Well, let's talk about all of this with Maxwell Marlow, who's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Very, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. I'm obviously doing better than an awful lot of these young Brits who are 18 to 13-year-olds and others who are, frankly, feeling rather despondent. Let's talk first of all about the the 600,000 graduates who are claiming benefits. Now, I didn't find the job I wanted straight after uni, but I didn't claim benefits. I worked as a waitress, I worked as a temp secretary. I did every job I had to do to scrape by with my rent and pay some of the debts off. But these are people who've gone to university, they've got a load of debt, they've got a degree, a piece of paper they assumed was worth something, and now they're not working. Are they all on the dole or are they on sickness benefits? What are they doing?
Yeah, so a lot of these young people are on the dole, actually. They can't find work. And, it's all very, really good to say, benefits Britain, they're being lazy. There is an element of that, don't get me wrong. But actually what this actually speaks to is the massive increase in employers' national insurance that has been striking a lot of those low-paid work. I mean, you just said, Julia, you were a waitress when you couldn't find a job. When I was at school, I worked behind a bar, I worked in a hotel. I know for a fact now that a lot of hospitality businesses are shuttering at record rates. Yeah. Because they can't afford to employ these staff.
So a lot of the jobs that they would be doing, they're not getting. And one of the other issues I found in a previous incarnation at another station, talking to people who were saying, I'm 26, 27, I can't get a job. And a lot of them be young people saying, well, I've got a degree and I don't see why I should work as a waiter or work in a bar or work in a sandwich shop. I've got a qualification. And what they've got is a 2-2 in media studies from a former polytechnic, and they've been sold the lie that is going to be worthwhile to any future employer. Brackets, it's not, close brackets. But they think, but I'm a graduate, I'm too good to do those jobs, I don't have to do those jobs. There are a lot of young people who don't understand that any job is better than no job, and that you need to start at the bottom. And yes, sometimes you will just be making people tea and doing some more menial tasks before you move on in your career.
Yeah, totally. I mean, let's look at some of the degrees that people are getting from these Mickey Mouse degrees. A lot of people could say photography, for example, that's one that is the lowest paying coming out. I mean, data from Adzuno, which is an aggregate of a lot of these degrees, £23,000 a year after graduation. It's nothing, basically. And
I would have dreamt I was on £9 grand in my local paper. And I know, even allowing for the fact it was a different generation ago, quite a few, that's still, even with inflation, way less than that.
Totally. But still, they're going to these universities, they're Mickey Mouse degrees, they don't make much sense. The reason why, Julie, we have a lot of these third-rate universities pushing out third-rate degrees is to mask youth unemployment. Now, as soon as they graduate, they do struggle to find a job. But coming straight out of school at the age of 18, a lot of the thinking around the education slogan that Tony Blair was pushing out for so long was this entire thing. It was, we're there to mask youth unemployment because we're going to increase the regulations on employment. We're going to put in the minimum wage, which destroys these kind of low-skilled jobs. And it has been really, really detrimental to the country and to young people. So no wonder so many people are thinking of leaving.
I disagree with you on the minimum wage issue. There was lots of warnings at the time. Oh, that's going to absolutely ruin companies. If you can't pay a decent, livable wage, you're an employee. You shouldn't be employing people at all, in my view. But there does come a point, again, we put those extra taxes, national insurance on, and you lower the threshold which is paid. Those people then do become too expensive for what they can contribute at that time. Now, you guys at the Adam Smith Institute, you've got Adam Smith Insights, looking at this. It was this part of your Anxious Generation series, which I find fascinating. We've got a whole generation of young people who find life very difficult to cope with. I mean, very different to what, I've got on my screens in here these celebrations of the Lionesses outside Buckingham Palace after their victory parade. Playing an entire tournament with a broken tibia, overcoming adversity, getting up, almost facing defeat, and the resilience, the belief in themselves. That's what we would love from a lot of our young people, but they don't feel it. Should we have sympathy for them because they've gone through lockdown, because of all the difficulties they've got, getting their chances of getting a decent job, getting on the housing ladder, having the stuff that, say, my parents certainly took for granted as automatic things. Should we be sorry for them, or do they frankly need a little bit of a shake and a wake-up slap to reality?
I think things are really, really discouraging for young people nowadays, and that's borne out by the data. Wages haven't grown since about 2008. We asked, people from across political spectrum as well. It's not just whiny lefty students. 54% of young people who vote Conservative, are struggling to make ends meet. 49% of Reform voters are struggling to make ends meet. In that age bracket, it's difficult across the board. And we look at housing, massive housing crisis, unprecedented immigration to the system. Labour aren't doing anything about it, obviously. The government are really struggling to get those homes built. Yeah. Obviously, 65% of young people struggling to find somewhere to live. So they live with mum and dad. If they live with mum and dad, they may be well out of finding a job from somewhere. All of these issues compound. And you're right to mention lockdown as well, Julia. I know I've been on the show before, discussed it with you. It was a disgrace, and there's been no recompense for young people to deal with those problems. And now we just see this huge explosion of mental health problems. Yes or no? Is that valid? Is it not? We have seen quite a lot of it, but we've also seen a massive economic contraction. So no wonder 1 in 4 young people are looking at moving abroad, especially when you've got TikTok and you can see all these people living at large in America or the UAE or in Europe. Meanwhile, in the UK, it is broken Britain.
Although, of course, people do only put on their best days on things like TikTok and Insta, don't they? The worrying thing is, in terms of the young Brits who leave, is you tend to lose your brightest and your best, your people who can get a visa to go to these countries, who would be welcomed. They've got qualifications. They feel like, I can have a better future somewhere else, and I can afford to buy a home and raise a family. We might lose a lot of people who would have been really important in our economy and in our society.
Totally, and we were really reliant for a long time on bringing more of the world's best to the UK. Look at pre-Blair, 14,000 people a year net migration. These were top scientists, top students who'd go on to do really high-performing roles. They'd be bankers and manufacturers and innovators. And now we're losing those people. They're all going. And for young people especially, if you don't, we saw this with the football, I should say. Chloe Kelly saying, I'm proud to be British. I'm proud to have British blood
I'm proud to be English. She said, I'm proud to be English.
And that's fantastic. But that's a top sports person. For most young people, they walk around the streets nowadays and they go, where's this all gone? Why should I stay here? Why should I suffer under this massive tax regime, under this government which hates me? And just nothing is working. So no wonder they're looking elsewhere. It's terrible news for Britain, for England maybe specifically, but we need to do something quickly to solve this.
Absolutely. Maxwell Marlow, always so good to talk to you. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. I think he's probably in that age bracket. I should have asked him his age. Tom Slater, you're a bit out of that age bracket now. You're a graduate. But I mean, there is I can see and feel a real sort of like, how hard do I have to work to get ahead? There used to be, if you worked hard, you could, even if you're in a couple, you could afford to buy your home, you can live somewhere, you can have a garden for your kids, you have a future. People are really worried about the basics, about paying for the bills. There are lots of expensive things now, people wanting to have their iPhones and their gadgets, things that cost a lot more than they used to. We didn't have those things, there's extra cost. But nevertheless, you can see why a lot of young people feel a bit despondent about, I'm just not going to have the life that my parents had or my grandparents had.
No, absolutely, and I think it goes across the different demographics as well, insofar as often this discussion is had because it's amongst media people. You think of kind of university graduates and so on and so forth, but amongst people who are leaving school, not necessarily going on to a university, working in call centres, working in shops, all the rest of it, that kind of sense that there's a pathway for those people as well has completely disappeared over many decades now. So there's this kind of bleakness across the board, and whereas previously we might have seen that more acutely in kind of working class communities, where the pathway that used to exist to better employment, more meaningful employment, the ability to strike out on your own and start a family, that's long disappeared. There's even a sense amongst the middle class now that that is fast disappearing for them as well. So that's a recipe for real despondency, I think, across that generation.
People need full optimism. And again, the idea that that every generation will do better than the generation before. That is not going to be the case for a long time. But don't worry, we'll be all paying taxes to pay for our parents and grandparents and their pensions. That's the reality. I think the intergenerational debate is going to be the next really big battle in terms of our society.